Learn the basics of CSS with Cookie Clicker game project. In the previous video, we did this cookie clicker. So I can click cookie and my count will be incremented. But this game is very plain, so we don't have any styles. Actually, to change the styles of this game, we will use a CSS file. First of all, open the folder where your project is located, and here create a new file. I click new file icon, then type style.css. Now I can hide the Explorer. And this is a plain CSS file. So now we need to connect it to our HTML. For that, in the head, right after the title, I can write link column CSS. Then press enter. It creates a link to your CSS file with all the necessary fields. Now I can just save this file. Now I go to our CSS file, and now we can try to change something. I've changed the background of our game, so I'm sure that this file is connected correctly. So this is the basic structure of CSS. We always use a selector, which is generally a tag from our HTML file. So as you see, we have a body tag that contains all the visible elements on our page. And I use this tag to apply the property of background color. And then the value of this property is gray. As you see, we have a lot of text that explains what it does. For example, I also want to change the font color. For that, I have a color property. I type color, then press enter, and now I see the list of all options for the color. I type white. If I save this file, you see that currently our font is white. These properties are applied to the body tag. But if you look at our HTML, you will see that actually body tag doesn't have any text. It has another tag B that contains the text count column 0. And this text also have been changed even though that we haven't applied any properties directly to the B tag. When we don't specify any direct properties for the B tag, it tries to inherit the properties from the parent elements. In this case, the parent element is body. So for example, if I add the tag B, and if I change this color to another one, now we see that the text is green. And this is because we directly specified the property for the B tag. Also, I see that we have one property width that is equal to 100 pixels in the HTML. But generally, we write such properties in CSS file. So let's delete it from the HTML. And now let's apply it to CSS. So I add a new tag image. And here I change the width to 100 pixels. And now we see absolutely the same result. Actually, my elements are very small. So currently I have the zoom of 500. If you click the zoom button, you can see that my current zoom is 500. So let's reset it. And now let's change the sizes that we don't need to zoom this page. So for example, the image size can be 250 pixels. And now let's change the font size. Inside of the P tag, I type font, and now you see the list of different properties that the font has. The first property after the font is font size. And here I can use the default values like large, medium, small, or I can type pixels. For example, I put 50 pixels. I save this file, and now we see that our font is much bigger. Let's try 100 pixels. I also don't like this color, so let's delete green color. So now I like the size of our font. But if you Google for any CSS code, probably you will see rems instead of pixels. Rems are also the static units, so one rem is the same as 60 pixels. But I return back 100 pixels. Then let's look at other font properties. I type font again, and right after the size, I see font family property. And here I have different font family options. For example, I can choose Arial, and now you see that our font family have been changed. Currently, the Arial font family is applied, but you see that we have provided 3 different options. If the Arial option is incompatible with the user's browser, it will try to use Helvetica. If this font size is also incompatible, it will use the last option. And if all these font family options are incompatible, it will use the default option that any browser has. So when we don't provide any font family, we also see the default option of the Google Chrome. The next property is font weight. And here you see different numerical options, as well as bold, lighter, or normal. So by default, normal is applied. So it doesn't change anything. But for example, I can use bold. And now you see that my font weight is much bolder. And actually not all the options will change something. So for example, if I put bolder, we will not see any changes. And this is because Arial doesn't have bolder font weight. All these options depends on the font weights that a specific font family has. I know that Arial has only 3 different options, so this is the reason why I can use bold, lighter, or normal. But if a font family has more options, you can use these numerical options, where 100 is the lighter option and 800 is the most bold option that this font family has. So in this way, you can discover different options. So you just type something like font, and then you see a list of filtered options by the popularity. The font size is the most popular option that we change. Then we change font family, font weight, font style, and so on. So you can discover different options to see what you can change. Now let's talk about positions of the elements. Currently, the position is in the top left corner, but for example, we want to change it to the middle. So the simplest option is to use margin. So I have margin property, then I press enter. And here I can type the value in pixels or rems. For example, I type 100 pixels. And now you see that our text have been shifted to the right side. So for example, I type 300 pixels. And currently we see that our text is almost in the middle. So margin actually adds an invisible border. If you inspect the page by right click, then choose the inspect property. Here you can inspect different options. So you can choose elements, and I can hover over P, and now you see this orange border. If I choose computed option, you will see that this is the margin of 300 pixels. And now you see that actually we have created this invisible border around the P tag. So and this is the reason why the position have been shifted. Let's also add something to our cookie. I will also add margin of 300 pixels. And now we see that our cookie in the bottom of this page and our elements are very far away from each other. So actually I want to apply margin only to the body tag. I don't want to add margin inside of the P tag or image tags. So I delete the current margin. Now we see that our elements are close to each other. And now inside of the body tag, I add margin of 300 pixels. And now we see that our elements are around the middle of the screen. Now, if you look at body tag, you can see that we have this orange border around our elements. And you see that actually margin property applies the border from all the sides. But what you can do in CSS, for example, instead of the margin property, you can choose margin top, bottom, left, or right. It will add the border only to one side. So for example, I can choose margin left property, and now I will write 300 pixels. And now you see that our elements have been shifted from the left side, but it is still very close to the top of this page. And now if I want to move it from the top of this page, I can separately set the margin of the top. So for example, I put minus 100 pixels. And now you see that our elements have been shifted up because we used negative value. So now you know the basics of CSS. In the next video, we'll continue to work on this project.